Welcome to the show that takes a deep dive into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. We have a lot to get to tonight and no time to waste, so toss that phone aside and get ready for the straight facts. The charges against 7 people connected to those campus protests at U of M dropped by the Attorney General's office. And one of those protesters is on The Pulse tonight. We're talking with her, plus hearing from the AG about the decision. And 100 days in, we are checking in on those massive cuts in the federal government. Some permanent changes, but some about faces as well. Was it all worth it? A Democrat and a Republican you know well are in the hot seat weighing in. We begin tonight on Capitol Hill, where President Trump's Treasury Secretary faced questions from Congress, specifically about those sweeping changes recommended by the Department of Government Efficiency. We're talking about Mr. Bessent. He defended the moves made by the Trump administration, saying they set the table for a robust economy. The Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters grilled him, saying Americans deserve answers, pointing to the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as a prime example.
Today, you need to tell the American people why you're dismantling agencies that protect consumers from financial fraud and abuse and weakening ones meant to support the small businesses struggling under the weight of your policies. You need to answer for this, and you need to answer for why senior members of this administration are trying to make a buck off of this market manipulation and blatant, brazen corruption.
The core components of the Trump economic agenda are trade, tax cuts, and deregulations. These are not standalone policies. They are interlocking parts of an engine designed to drive economic growth and domestic manufacturing. Tax cuts and cost savings from deregulation raise real incomes for families and businesses. Tariffs create an incentive for reshoring jobs and fair trade. And deregulation complements tariffs by making it easier to invest in energy and manufacturing projects.
That's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent appearing on Capitol Hill, coming as the Federal Reserve keeps its key interest rate at 4.3%. Now, that's despite President Trump's demands to lower borrowing costs. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said there's simply too much uncertainty to say how the Fed should react, given tariffs have hurt consumers and businesses with their confidence. But he did point out they haven't done noticeable harm to the economy. Like we said off the top of the show, no time to waste, so let's pick up the pace as we run through some of the other big stories we're following at this hour. We begin with the immigration issue, where a federal judge says the Trump administration can't deport migrants to Libya unless they have a meaningful chance to challenge it in court. Lawyers for the migrants were told the administration planned to deport them there. Libya is a country with a history of human rights violations. The judge had previously ruled any migrants deported to a country other than their homeland must be allowed to argue it would jeopardize their safety. Saying in the classroom, where a federal judge ordered the Education Department to unfreeze COVID-19 relief money. That cash was given to schools to help them recover academically from the pandemic. $189 billion in aid was provided, and schools were given broad latitude on how to use it. Nearly all of it has been spent, but some districts got deadline extensions to figure out how to spend it. Districts spent it on things from tutoring and summer school to library books and safety renovations. And a pro-Trump media outlet will provide programming for Voice of America. One America News, or OAN, reached an agreement with the administration. That outlet recently ran a piece it claimed was investigative, but titled, quote, 100 Golden Days. Voice of America outlet hasn't operated since mid-March after the president ordered funding cuts. He claimed that outlet pushed liberal bias. A former correspondent says by law, the news Voice of America puts out should be balanced. And all eyes are on the Vatican, specifically the Sistine Chapel's chimney. Day one ended with black smoke, which means the cardinals haven't picked a new pope. That's not a surprise. No decision was expected today. Starting tomorrow, they can hold up to 4 votes a day, 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. That process will go until they elect a new pope, and that's when white smoke will come from the chapel's chimney. The Cardinals heard from the dean of the College of Cardinals, who pushed them to find a pope who values unity and puts their personal interests aside.
This is a human act for which every personal consideration must be set aside, keeping in mind and heart only the God of Jesus Christ and the good of the Church and of humanity.
I asked the question, what do you want to see in the next pope? Here's what some of you told us on social media, as we always like to include our viewers in the conversation. Thank you, Patty, for writing in. I hope you will continue to remind Catholics in leadership roles to be more Christian. Jim says, I hope the next pope is progressive, like Pope Francis. Kim says, I hope that the Catholic Church will continue to do what Francis started, inclusivity, kindness, and an open door for all. She goes on to say, so many people have turned away because of intolerance for human differences. And Don says, live up to Catholic doctrine, understand its role in Western civilization and the progress for improved humans' lives since. All right, we are turning now to the fallout from those pro-Palestinian protests at U of M last year. The charges were dismissed, but tonight, one of those protesters joins us on The Pulse to talk about her reaction and her plans moving forward. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about the charges being dismissed against 7 protesters at the University of Michigan from last year. One of those protesters, live via Zoom, Sammy Lewis, and her lawyer, Amir Maklid. They're both with us here in the studio to talk to us, one on Zoom, one here in person. We thank you both for being here today.
Thank you very much for having us, Roop.
Sammy, this is, by many people's account, a happy day because of the fact that the charges were dropped. Reflect for a moment how you found out about the news and your reaction.
I found out as I was first arriving to court. One of my co-defendants texted that there was good news, and as I got out of the car, he met me and another co-defendant to share that the charges were being dropped, and we really weren't sure if it was true yet, but once we got to the courtroom and met our attorneys, that's when we realized that it was true, and we just felt a lot of relief and joy.
When you look at the charges that were coming against you, at first with the Attorney General Dana Nessel charging 7 different students here, we're talking about felony charges, misdemeanors. Was there anything in the charging that you saw and you said, well, I can see how people saw it this way? Is there anything at all from the trespassing or any of the other misdemeanors that you kind of looked at and said, hey, maybe there's some truth to this?
Definitely not. I think that we all had the right to be there and the right and responsibility to protest. And also, just for a correction, we aren't all students.
No, you're right. Absolutely. In fact, out of all those charges, some were students, some were not. People were there to protest. And Sammy, that's a very good point. Thanks for making that distinction. I want to talk to you, Mr. Maklid, about your thoughts on what we saw here. First of all, let's kind of go back to the protests themselves. We have obviously what's going on right now in this world. It's a very hard world to live in, and people who come from different lands are upset about what's happening back home. Did you think that the protesters went too far at any point, even if it not be illegal? Was there a point at which you saw what these protesters were doing and you said, hey, as an attorney, I think you should back off?
The encampments started in May of 2024. They lasted almost 30 days.
Yeah.
And at no point were they ever crossing the line. They were always peaceful. There was never any crimes of violence. There was never any problems with vandalism. There was nothing that was going on that was disrupting the course or conduct of the students that are attending university. These were peaceful encampments where they were confined to the diag at the University of Michigan. And so as the students were trying to basically stay, they wanted divestment. They were demanding that the Board of Regents divest from the State of Israel. And they have that right to protest. At the very crux of this issue is, are students allowed to have that ability to protest and speak up on these issues? And historically, we've always seen the diag at the University of Michigan to be a place where people can come up and speak out as to their truths. It happened in the Vietnam War era. It happened in the South African apartheid era. It happened even when people were protesting for voters' rights in the Civil Rights era. This is something that has a long-standing history, and at this point we found it to be overreach from the government to try to dismantle and bust up this encampment.
Let me ask you this, and I'm not making any allegations here against any of the protesters who you were referencing here at the University of Michigan, but across the country we saw protests like this, and many people said, look, you're allowed to come out and protest, you're allowed to say things, but when you use language like river to the sea, it is ethnically charged, it is politically charged, and it has a lot of people of Jewish faith going, man, that seems almost like a threat. Did you ever see it that way?
No, these students have the ability to speak their minds, and what they were trying to get their point across, it wasn't chants, they weren't slogans, they were divestment issues. They were concerns about the ongoing war that's happening on Gaza, and they wanted their university. And what's interesting about all these university cases across the country, they're taught to advocate in these classrooms in the morning, and by the time they're in the afternoon, when they're actually exercising this advocacy that they're taught, they're being criminally charged for it, and that's wrong. That's not what these universities are. The fabric of our country. That's where democracy is born. It's where ideas are formed, and where these students live the rest of their lives with what they were taught in their university years. This should be, something that should be encouraged for students to be engaging in, but peacefully, which is what happened here.
Well, Sammy, I want to bring you back into the fold here for a moment and ask you about your thoughts on what you've heard the Trump administration talk about when it comes to some of the students who are not here as U.S. citizens, some of these protesters across the country who are not here as U.S. citizens, who there's kind of an axe on their heads if they did take place in protests to perhaps even revoke their student visas. Your reaction to that, the administration's take on student protests for those who have those student visas?
I think that we are on indigenous land, and that America has come to be out of immigration. And so when people come here for their education, for a better job, a better life, whatever it is, I think that means that they should still be able to practice these same rights that we all are supposed to have, no matter where they come from.
I want to bring into the fold here, as we always are going to do on this show, is be fair to show all of the different perspectives here. In fact, the Attorney General herself is hosting a town hall about some other issues and topics here today. She had this to say about these charges, and I want to bring this up right here on our screen. Dana Nessel, the Attorney General, saying, when my office made the decision to issue charges of trespassing and resisting and obstructing a police officer in this matter, we did so based on the evidence and facts of the case. I stand by those charges and that determination. I want Mr. Meckler for a moment, and we'll just continue the full screen here. Despite months and months of court hearings, the court has yet to make a determination on whether probable cause was demonstrated that the defendants committed these crimes, and if so, to bind the case over to circuit court for trial, which is the primary obligation of the district court for any felony offense. She goes on to say that this case has become the lightning rod of contention, and that certainly it has. You perhaps would agree with Dana Nessel on that part.
I think so.
But let me ask you about what she's saying. When you look at even if just the misdemeanor charges, whether or not you believe that someone should be able to get into good trouble, so to speak, and do these things, do you legally see why there was misdemeanor charges like trespassing on this?
None of these charges should have ever been brought from the onset. And I think this case fell under the scrutiny, and that's why the Attorney General made the wise choice of just going ahead and dismissing these cases. Because the defense strategy from the beginning was to challenge every aspect of this prosecution and to try to stonewall every approach to move forward, and it worked. Because now we saw that they raised the white flag. They said we don't want to deal with this anymore. It became a point of contention, she called it. But that was more damage control than anything. They knew that this case could not withstand the merits. Otherwise, they would have continued this litigation.
I want to ask you about the future as you look forward here, and you look at Sammy, and you look at yourself, and you look at your Jewish brothers and sisters who all live in this country.
Yes.
Did you see better days ahead?
Always see better days. I think that these are the stress tests of our country. If we look historically about some of the civil rights concerns that we've had historically, we had some real times of struggle and then good years that followed with positive impact that happens. And these, although they're contentious at times, I think our country, in the United States, we understand differences and we're rooted in trying to get what's right. And I'm a firm believer that we're a land of laws, and the Constitution does protect us. And hopefully the courts will stand with us on these issues.
We're a land of people who come from all over the world, and that's what makes this country so great. But in that strength also lies the burden of having to try to get along when it's really hard to do that. And Sammy, I'm going to ask you with the last word here about your hopes. You're looking at the world right now. You see India and Pakistan now going possibly at the brink of war. People who are Indian and Pakistani, people who are Palestinian, people who are Jewish, all sharing this land. Your hope moving forward?
I hope for liberation.
Sammy, want to thank you for your time here today. Mr. Macklin, always good to see you. Thanks for your time as well.
Thank you as well, Ruth. Thank you.
Here on The Pulse. Up next, the DOGE cuts, 100 days in. Good, bad, a combination of the two? We're diving into it with Mary Waters, a prominent Democrat here in Detroit, and Republican Aaron Tobin. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. And joining us now to talk about 100 days of DOGE, Democratic Detroit City Council member Mary Waters and Oakland County GOP Executive Board member Aaron Tobin. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you.
Having a civil discussion with a Republican and a Democrat, as I say, something that you won't find on social media because it's something else out there. But this is real life, and this is the way society works. You can disagree without being disagreeable, and we always appreciate both your perspectives. Absolutely. All right, so here we go. Let's begin with the person who is going to be, I guess in a sense, taking the side of Elon Musk and President Donald Trump.
Me?
I would just have, it wouldn't be Mary Waters, I'll tell you that. His approval rating right now, Elon Musk, is at 34%. That's lower than President Trump's, who's coming in at 39%. And 57% of the people, according to a recent poll, said they disapprove of Elon Musk's DOGE cuts. Your thoughts on those numbers? Because that's a reflection of Democrats and Republicans who are polled.
I don't really trust those numbers. Certainly not what I see. I haven't met one person that is against cleaning up waste in the government, and I'm sure Mary, who's been on the council in Detroit, is against waste.
Sure.
And waste and spending that is not being legitimate. The issue that I see with people is that they're all against massive waste, and they love when light is shed on the waste, and they want to get rid of it. Sometimes it's how it's being done, and they're saying maybe it could be done in a more professional, calm manner.
Do you believe that?
It would be nice. I mean, you know, Elon Musk was up on a stage with a saw and, you know, let's cut, and, you know, it gets people riled up. But when you're getting rid of thousands of people and you're cutting big budgets, I think it could be done more practically and patiently. But some of the problems is that the heads of the department were not cooperating, so they had to get rid of the whole department.
And 100,000 people have left their jobs, have been fired in many cases, given an early retirement, so to speak, in the government. And he says he would shave $2 trillion off of the budget. He ended up doing $160 billion. Councilwoman, I have to ask you the question. I remember seeing a video of then President Barack Obama saying we have to make painful cuts because those are important because the government is bloated. When he said it, it didn't seem to be, didn't rustle too many feathers. But here we have someone who's actually doing the work, and it is rustling a lot of feathers. What's the difference?
Well, absolutely is ruffling some feathers, because what we're doing here is that we are choosing dollars over lives. That's exactly what this Trump administration is doing. And when you think about it, 40% of black women die more often than white women of breast cancer. I'm a breast cancer survivor myself. And I've got to tell you, had it not been for all of the research, working with the universities and so forth, early detection saves lives. I went through that chemo treatment. I had difficulty sometimes walking and eating, keeping food down. You know, those are serious. And this, guess what? This is Women's Health Month. So what do? We get cuts to those critical dollars for research. The universities and the doctors cannot save lives if they don't have those dollars. Those dollars are needed.
So, Aaron, to kind of fill everyone in, we're talking about $200 million of a cut in federal deficit spending. That's research grant funding for universities to do the kind of work that needs to be done to take care of people who need it most. Are you concerned? Is that what you mean when you say sometimes being a little more careful about how they go about it?
There's been no cuts. The cuts to the crucial medical, all these major, there have been proposals. There have been things put on pause. There has been such massive fraud uncovered that now they have to say, wait a minute, before these funds go through, let's verify that there's checks and balances, which we love to say on the Pulse.
Yeah.
There's been checks and balances. There's been checks and balances installed that never existed before. A lot of these NGO, non-government organizations, have been getting hundreds of millions of dollars. and they aren't spending them for what they said they were, and at the end of the year they have $50 million left over, they put it into their private bank account. They've rented out Caesar's Palace, the Department of Education. Now, give me a break.
No, listen, there is absolute bloat, but I do have to ask you, because you're talking about the firings that were put into place, and people were fired, people were let go. I know you can't close a department down, you can't completely do all of this unilaterally. However, there has been a lot of firings, and because of that, some cuts that you're talking about are at risk of happening here. Are you concerned about cuts happening to USAID when it comes to food going to food banks, when it comes to federal research dollars going into universities? Does any of that concern you?
It hasn't happened yet.
But does it concern you that it could happen?
It would concern me if it happened. Let's wait and see if it happens.
All of it concerns me. Every single bit of it concerns me. The food stamps. Our senior citizens need the help. We're making cuts where they are not necessarily necessary right now. You are talking about seniors dying earlier before their time. And let me get back to this breast cancer piece. I want to talk about it because I know how critical it is. I lived it. That's right. There's a triple negative breast cancer out there. Scientists yet are not even sure how to treat it. If we cut off the research dollars, how can we ever find not just a cure, but treatment?
But President Trump has said about...
It's a very aggressive cancer.
And you're right about that. He has said that he doesn't want to hurt people, he doesn't want to see people hurt, but he wants to make these cuts, and he will work with them. Like he eased up on tariffs, do you believe that this president, if you believe him when he says he doesn't want to hurt anyone, that if he eased up on tariffs, that he'll ease up on some of this stuff
Well,
too?
let me tell you something. I'm not sure if I believe him at this point, because what I'm trying to understand, and hopefully someday I can have a conversation with President Trump. I'd like to be able to do that, because everything that negatively impacts black people, he appears to be for it. Why is that? I want to know from President Trump, why are you so eager to push things that hurt black people?
And if you had an audience with President Trump, you would ask him that question directly?
I would ask him that question right to his face. That's right.
Pastor Lorenzo Sewell is a friend of President Trump's. You know Pastor Sewell.
I do.
You've spoken at the church before. Have you asked Pastor Sewell to talk to the president and maybe arrange a conversation?
No, but guess what? I will, and I'll go through Pastor Sewell and all the others, maybe even Speaker Hall, Matt Hall. I mean, we need to happen. They need to understand what's at stake here. Our seniors, our children, no food, poverty, all of these things that are impacting us. You cannot just throw numbers out there and say, wherever it hits, wherever it lands, it's hurting a lot of people.
Aaron, I do want to ask you the question. When it comes to this is Democrats and Republicans, because there's a lot of Democratic politicians who are out of touch with America as well. So this is not
That's why Trump
I'm not
won,
pointing a finger.
and he's doing what he promised he would do.
But I'm saying Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. Does he understand what it means to cut food bank money? Do you think he really gets it?
So no food bank money has been cut.
But there's proposals.
But it has to go through Congress.
Of course.
There's checks and balances. Yes. Elon Musk can say, I want to cut all the food banks and I want to cut cancer research, which he does not. President Trump has a wife and daughters. Elon Musk has several ex-wives and daughters. Republicans are compassionate. They have families. Why would they want to cut off research that is necessary for their kids and their grandkids' lives? It's not happening. There are proposals, and Congress will verify what gets cut, and what does not get cut.
But do you think Elon Musk is in touch with how the cuts could affect people?
Yes, but Elon Musk is out. He is on his way out. It's just a green herring to talk, a red herring to talk about Elon Musk. He has set beautiful checks and balances. Now Social Security can talk to these different foundations that are getting all this money and stop people that are 115, 120 years old from getting small business loans.
Elon Musk will never be sensitive to these issues.
Category.
He just won't be. You saw him walking around with the chainsaw. He can never be sensitive to these issues that affect millions and millions of Americans. He doesn't have it within him to be sensitive to those things. The only hope that we have right now is that Congress does the right thing. They understand how all of their communities are impacted, both Democrats and Republicans.
We say it all the time on this show, Councilwoman and Aaron Tobin. There are, as you mentioned, guardrails in place, secretaries of state, we have attorneys general, we have federal courts, And some of them are Trump-appointed judges who are saying, hold on, hold the horse, let's figure this out. And that's what happens each and every day. So
We
let's
have
keep that in
elected
mind.
officials.
Thank you for your time.
And that's
I
who
hope
we
that
should
they
be
stand
talking
strong.
to.
Well, that's what we do.
I hope so.
Call your lawmakers. Talk to them because that's what you want to do. That is the Pulse for tonight. Remember to email us your political questions you want answered or fact check you want to see, or perhaps you didn't like something you saw. Happens every night. You can email us. Just scan the QR code on your screen. I'm Ruth Farage. As always, have a good night. Thank you both.